Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's Breaking Convention. Predator 2 is the best Predator movie. So Breaking Convention is a series I'm doing to express an opinion on a film that goes against popular opinion or the majority opinion that is overwhelmingly expressed on the internet. Breaking Convention is not very likely to win me more subscribers and is probably more likely than not to gain me more dislikes than likes. However, I'm not doing Breaking Convention to win any popularity contest. I'm doing it to express an opinion I and others share that seldom gets heard because it is often drowned out on the internet by the opposing opinion. A saying I was always quite fond of was, just because something is popular doesn't mean it's correct. And so I'm here not only to express opinions but to back them up and explain why I and others may feel this way. And even though they may be in the minority, they are still valid. So, the popular opinion I'll be diverging from today is the opinion that John McTiernan's 1987 movie Predator starring Arnold Schwarzenegger is the best film in the Predator franchise, which is overwhelmingly the opinion expressed as a fact over the internet. Instead, I'll be arguing that Stephen Hopkins' 1990 movie Predator 2 starring Danny Glover is the best Predator movie. Now, I won't really touch much on the other films in the Predator franchise because I overall agree with the common consensus on those films, particularly that the 2010 movie Predators was alright. It was a decent movie that didn't suck but wasn't great either, and Aliens vs. Predator movies are total and complete shite. I totally agree with both of these views, which are pretty much the common consensus, so instead I'll be focusing more on Predator and Predator 2. I'm going to have to give a spoiler warning for both Predator and Predator 2, as I'm likely to give away the ending and other details in these films. On Rotten Tomatoes, Predator has a critic score of 78% and an audience score of 87%, and on IMDb is an average rating of 7.8 out of 10. Whereas Predator 2 on Rotten Tomatoes has a critic score of 25% and an audience score of 44%, and its average on IMDb is about 6.2 out of 10. In addition, pretty much any critic on YouTube personality will tell you the original Predator with Schwarzenegger is by far the best Predator movie. However, I'm going to have to disagree with this common consensus, as I think Predator 2 is clearly the superior movie. However, I'm not the only one to have this opinion, as if you look at the individual reviews on Predator 2, you'll find that those that liked Predator 2 really liked it, and there were many fan reviews that specifically said Predator 2 was better than the first one. In fact, there were 2 critics listed on Rotten Tomatoes that said the same, that the second was better than the first. So, not only will I be arguing that Predator 2 isn't as bad as everyone thinks it is, I'll be arguing that the first Predator isn't as good as everyone makes it out to be. So, Predator 2 came out only 3 years after the first one in 1990, but it takes place in 1997. So, it set itself a mere 7 years into the future. The only difference is that LA has been overrun by drug gangs, war rages on between the Jamaicans and the Colombian gangs that has consumed the city and turned it into a war zone. Ironically, the crime rate in LA actually declined in the late 90s rather than got worse, as the early 90s saw one of the highest rates of crime in the city, but I suppose it was easy to predict that things were going to get worse rather than better. At any rate, since Predator thrives in war zones, it paints LA as an attractive place for his next hunt. So, now since I like to phrase everything in terms of a countdown, I will count down my top 8 reasons why Predator 2 is better than Predator. Starting with my number 8, Predator 2 is more fun. So in the late 80s and the early 90s, there was an action movie trope where a cop was seen as a renegade, always in trouble with his superiors, but the real badass who would get things done. Of course, this stereotype was first made popular in the 60s and 70s with the Dirty Harry movies, but in the late 80s and early 90s, it was a common action movie trope, whether it be Lethal Weapon, Die Hard, or Beverly Hills Cop. Well, Predator 2 took that trope to the extreme, as Danny Glover's character in this film was a way over the top renegade cop who defied the orders of his superiors, as he constantly got into arguments that almost turned into fistfights with the police captain and had an out and out feud with the DEA agent that almost come to blows. Watching this movie again was such a great fun callback to this renegade cop trope, and it was taking it to such an absurd extreme in this movie. You think it would make it bad, as it's really cheesy, but it's actually one of those examples of it's so bad it's good. If you don't take that part of the movie too seriously, you can have a lot of fun with it. Not to mention the scene where the Predator is healing himself in some old woman's apartment. As he screams, she gets her broom out like she's going to attack him, and after he bursts out through the wall and Danny Glover appears and says, "It's okay, I'm a cop," she's just like, I don't think he gives a shit. Funny stuff. And of course the scene where Danny Glover punches out the obnoxious tabloid reporter played by Morton Downey Jr., fun stuff as well. All this really elevates the entertainment value of this film over the first one. Number 7 is Predator 2 is scarier than the first. It was kind of scary to have this badass alien in the jungle picking off these big manly military dudes. However, Predator 2 took it to the next level, particularly with the subway scene where the Predator rips his way into a subway car and starts killing people where the lights are flashing, you can't really see anything. It's one of the best horror movie scenes of all time in my opinion. Nothing in the first Predator even comes close. Number 6 is better, more interesting characters. While the first Predator had Arnie, who is, well, Arnie, and then Carl Weathers, who always plays the best friend who dies halfway through the movie, and then Jesse Ventura, who says, "I ain't got time to bleed," before promptly just dying. And then there was that Native American dude, that bald guy, the nerdy guy, that guy who got shot, and the typical damsel in distress. Basically, there were a bunch of bland military dudes, whereas Predator 2 does a much better job of establishing original three-dimensional characters. Yes, they do kind of build off cop movie cliches, but they are well-rounded and interesting, and you buy their relationships and their camaraderie. Danny Achula, for example, comes off as a wise, well-rounded cop who's a good friend to Danny Glover's Mike Harrigan. And of course, we got Bill frickin' Paxton as the essential cop known as the Lone Ranger. And on top of that, you have interesting characters that shake things up, like Gary Busey's Peter Keyes and his henchman played by Adam Baldwin. All were more interesting characters than the ones that they had in the first movie. Number 5 is Predator 2 is inspired by major 80s action movies. So you can see a lot of elements of great action flicks in this film. It takes inspiration from, but does not borrow too heavily, has to be unoriginal. Like any good movie, it blends elements of the best of what came before it and to create something new and original. Not only is it inspired by the first Predator movie, but you see elements of RoboCop in here with the crime-ridden, desolate future and the wacky news reports that serve as satire. There's elements of Dirty Harry, as I said, with Danny Glover's Renegade Cop, elements of Die Hard, as at the end of the movie, the hero cop who's just like an ordinary regular guy is forced into an impossible situation he has to get himself out of. Elements of Aliens, as it even has Bill Paxton doing an over-the-top cocky character similar to Hudson, and of course showing multiple aliens at the end instead of just one. It takes the best elements from the best movie and blends them into something new. Number 4 is we see more of the Predator. In the first Predator movie, it takes about 20 or 30 minutes until they even hinted that the Predator even existed, and longer to actually see the freaking Predator. And even once they did, we didn't really see that much of it, whereas this film, Predator pops up in the very first scene of the movie and appears in every action scene in the film, and we get to see a lot more of him, how he hunts in this movie, and it was done in such a way that kept him mysterious and scary, but made him more interesting. Number 3 is the final fight was better. Don't get me wrong, the final fight in the first Predator movie was exciting, but it doesn't even compare to the final fight in this film. I mean, it was cool and all for Arnie to paint himself in mud, set a trap for the Predator, and be like, "Come on, kill me! Do it!" But the final fight in Predator 2 was far more exciting. It starts off with the feds cornering it in the slaughterhouse, but Lieutenant Harrigan sees it's going all wrong, so he goes in to hunt the Predator, and after it kills all the feds, he goes in to get it and catches it off guard and manages to wound it, and then they go to the rooftops and they have the showdown, which ends with them both hanging off a ledge. And so the Predator decides to set off the bomb like it did in the first film, but Harrigan slices off the bomb, which apparently stops the bomb, and whatever, just go with it. And the Predator crashes through an apartment building where Harrigan climbs down and chases him through the building, down an elevator shaft to the underground where the Predator's ship is hiding, and then chases it onto the ship, and they have this final hand-to-hand battle. Well, sort of hand-to-hand. Harrigan has the Predator's disc-type weapon, and the Predator has his blades coming out of his wrist. Anyway, epic battle. Then Harrigan finally kills it. And that was actually more badass than Schwarzenegger, who didn't actually fight the Predator hand-to-hand like that. He just set up a trap and then let the Predator blow himself up. This one was a lot more gritty, a lot more exciting, a lot more ins and outs to it, so much better final fight. Number 2 is expands upon Predator lore. The final scene in Predator 2 is amazing, as you see a whole bunch of Predators and not just the one. You see its trophy case that contains a lot of alien skulls, signifying that they go to multiple planets to hunt different aliens, and also that they have a sense of honor, as the Predators don't kill Harrigan and show him respect for managing to kill that other Predator and give him the gift of the old gun from 1715 that explained that they've been coming to Earth to hunt for at least hundreds of years. And also throughout the film you got a sense of the Predator's honor, as it wouldn't kill that little boy once he realized its toy gun was fake, and he wouldn't kill Leona once he realized that she was pregnant. But most of all, on the wall of alien trophies was a skull of the alien from Aliens. I first saw this movie when it first came out 25 years ago, and at the time I thought that this scene was what inspired Aliens vs. Predator franchise, but I found out just now, as I was researching for this video, that it was in fact the other way around. I didn't realize this, but the Alien vs. Predator comic book series was released before this movie, and the director and art director during the shoot decided to add an alien skull as homage to the comic books. I totally didn't know that. At any rate, I like the concept of Alien vs. Predator. I never read the comic books, but I read the novels based off the comic books, and they were spectacular. Absolutely awesome novels. The movies were complete and total shite, but I'm hoping one day they'll reboot them and do them properly, as the novels proved it can be done. Anyway, this ending really sparked my imagination and got me pumped, and I was kind of disappointed they never really followed up on it until 2010, and I still want to see more. And the number one reason why I think Predator 2 is the best Predator movie is more dynamic story. As cool as it was to see Schwarzenegger shout, "Get to the chopper! Come on! Do it! Now!" The actual story in the first film wasn't that dynamic and was a straightforward horror movie with a monster going around killing people in the jungle one at a time. It was given an action twist and a bit more spin to it, which is why I do really like the first movie a lot, but it's nowhere near as dynamic as Predator 2, which is a lot more than simply a monster going around killing soldiers in the jungle. There's a lot more ins, a lot more outs. First off, it's set in the middle of a gang war in an urban city with a lot more people around the Predator to kill or ignore. And then you have the added element of the federal agents that are aware of the Predators from the first film, and of course are trying to capture it alive in order to study it and improve their weapon delivery and technology, which not only made the story more dynamic, but also gave a great allegory. And that asshole reporter trying to get in the way, and of course there was some awesome ending that introduced a whole slew of Predators, was really exciting and opened up the world, making this this not only a great action movie, but a great science fiction movie as well. So all these reasons and much more is why I think Predator 2 is the best Predator movie in the Predator franchise. So just for the sake of clarity, if I were going to rate each of the Predator movies on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being the absolute worst, 10 being the absolute best, I would give Predator an 8, Predator 2 a 9, Predators a 6, and Alien vs. Predator a 1. Absolute shite. So that's it for my Breaking Convention video on the Predator movies. Be sure to check out my channel for many other film and television reviews. I do a lot of Game of Thrones and Star Trek reviews, and I'll be doing more Breaking Convention videos in the future, so be sure to subscribe to keep up with all that. And thanks a lot for watching.